Welcome to Merrifield's Gardening Advisor, brought to you by the experts at Merrifield Garden Center. Join us as we discover beautiful plants, new trends, and exciting ideas for your landscape. So let's get growing together. Merrifield's Gardening Advisor, bringing out the best in your garden.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Merrifield's Gardening Advisor. My name is David Yost. I'm here today with Karen Rexroad.
Yep. Pleasure to be here.
Oh, so glad to have you. Now, you just came back from New Orleans, is that right?
Right, where it was 60 to 70 degrees every day, so it was rude to come home.
Yeah, that is kind of an abrupt change. Yeah, especially yesterday, waking up was 11 degrees out.
I know.
And everything. That was tough.
Yeah.
Well, today we are talking about the winter landscape, because obviously we're in the middle of winter here, but
Yep.
to me, Karen, a garden really offers beauty at each season of the year.
Right, and winter is 3 months longer than 3 months, really. So if we're not trying to take advantage, I mean, we need to try to take advantage of that because that's another season in and of itself. So, you know, I'm glad to be able to show people some things that they can take advantage of, and you know, they're gorgeous. They're beautiful things in the winter, too.
Good. So I think Karen's got a lot of surprises for you. We've got everything from plants with beautiful structure to nice bark, and you're going to be surprised. There are even a few things that bloom in the winter time, but Karen will give us more details on that. First, I want to kind of talk a little bit about what's going on at the garden centers today. And of course, our seminars are in full swing, and they've just been really been just thrilling the response we're getting from everybody. We're getting, you know, 100, 125 good attendance showing up all these classes. And that's because they're so much fun. They're entertaining, there's fun, really educational as well.
Yeah.
So let's take a look and see what's going on at our garden centers this morning. Now, these seminars, they're at 10 o'clock in the morning. We have them at each one of our 3 locations. It's free, just show up, no reservations or anything necessary. And at the Gallows Road store, they're at Merrifield is Tips from Your Extension Agent. This is going to be a new topic we've never offered, but the Extension Service has so many valuable programs available to gardeners and homeowners throughout the counties. I thought it would be fantastic to have Adria Bordas, our Extension Agent from Fairfax County, who is professionally a plant pathologist, but she's going to come in and share some of the issues that they're looking at, you know, invasive pests and new emerging issues and that type of thing, as well as the different services that are available to you to help your garden really thrive and look better. So I can guarantee you that's going to be a very interesting class. And she's a
and I'm sure it will
great
be
instructor.
packed.
Yeah, so it's good to get there a few minutes early because seating is always limited. And then let's see what's going on at our Fair Oaks store. Evergreens for every garden. Now, Karen and I will be talking about evergreens and how valuable they are to the winter landscape. But really, these are the backbone of your garden. And we're going to have Joel Cook, one of our plant specialists, going through the full selection on all the different uses. So that's definitely going to be a fantastic class to attend. And then out at Gainesville, another new topic that we haven't offered in the past. This is one of my colleagues from the Fair Oaks store, Paul McLean's going to go out there at our Gainesville location. It's not to confuse things. We're talking about a new look at old favorites. This is really what we're talking about is plants, mostly shrubs, but things, everything from lilac to spirea and nandina, plants that have been part of our landscape for decades, but there's so many new varieties out there. You'd be amazed. So if you think that you know these plants, come on out and Paul's going to show you what's been happening as far as new developments in there. Always new stuff going on.
Yeah.
So that's this Saturday. It's going to be a tough choice to make, but look it over, pick the one that's most convenient, and we hope to see you there. And then next week, this is going to be a romantic weekend.
Yeah.
Next week being that's the Valentine's Day. Of course, what we're doing is focusing on romance and Valentine's, all 3 stores. So romance in the garden, all about the birds and bees. I'll be talking about that one, the biology of it all.
Oh, great.
And then Regina talking about romancing with plants. So we know that's a special day, and we got special classes planned for you. And so that's our seminars, but added bonus, guess what else is coming up? The Arlington Rose Foundation, they're going to be having a class at our Fair Oaks store tomorrow. So that's going to be tomorrow afternoon, Fun with Roses. That's going to focus on floral design. So if you have an interest in floral design, come on down, check that out. And of course, as we're talking about roses, everybody knows next weekend is Valentine's Day. Roses kind of go hand in hand with Valentine's Day. And at the garden centers, we are stocking up and getting ready. So we'll have roses available by the dozen. You can buy them boxed, or you can buy them in vases. They ran anywhere from like $49.99 to $69.99 a dozen, depending on how you range.
Lovely.
That's a pretty fair price for roses on Valentine's Day. So please, by all means, if you're not already thinking about Valentine's Day, put that on your agenda. If you want roses, of course, we've got African violets, we've got the begonias. The greenhouse is packed full of color. So we are definitely your stopping place for Valentine's Day.
Sounds wonderful.
Cool.
I would love some flowers.
Put the little hint out there, huh, for somebody special in your life, right?
Right.
Cool. All right, well, that's enough with announcements, because there's so much going on. But what we're primary topic here is looking at the winter landscape, and we're going to kick that off with a few pictures.
So this is the kind of, you know, we talk about the bones of the garden, the structure of the garden, and this is actually a photograph that was taken out at Blandy, which is a state arboretum of Virginia, out near Winchester, and you can see exactly what we're talking about with what we have for winter. And you know, it's just we need it. You know, if it was just a perennial garden, it would be dormant and it would be rather flat, but we add a few evergreens and things with structure, and you know, you understand what we're talking about when we say bones of the garden.
And to me, it's a beautiful composition. You know, we get so focused on color, but like in the winter, you know, to me that's looks basically like a black and white photograph, but still has that beauty that shows up in there. And we'll just go through and see what else we have.
So we're going to talk about exfoliating trees, which is one of my favorite topics, and we have many choices. The paperbark maple being kind of the holy grail of all of them, but there's quite a few. We have a lot of choices in exfoliating barked trees for our gardens. So this is just one example. And I tasked myself a few years ago to go out into the garden and to gather flowers and to photograph them every month of the year. And I remember thinking that January and February would be really difficult to do that. And I started doing that just because I wanted to try to remember or at least have a record of what blooms in what months. It gets all kind of, you know, foggy when you can't remember, you know, when something bloomed. But I was so surprised at how well this turned out with the seeds and the dried heads of seeds and berries. You know, it really was maybe my favorite photograph of the entire year.
I think that's such a neat idea that you went out and took those photographs on a monthly basis, because I noticed a lot of things. Like, I've started to really appreciate the value of this, but you know, I didn't really take appreciation until I started photographing it myself. Right,
and then that gives you a database or a, you know, something you can, it's a record. Because it's hard, you know, did it bloom in March or did it bloom in April? Or, you know, we have some real surprises for March. There's a lot of good stuff that blooms in March.
That's a good idea. So I guess if you missed January, you could still start on it this month.
Well, and the winter aconites are actually about to bloom. In my garden, they're showing color right now. So this is right here, right now.
Good. Well, as Karen's showing us, there is a lot going on right now in the garden. We're going to take a quick commercial break, and when we come back, we're going to go into all this in much greater detail. Welcome back to Merrifield's Gardening Advisor, and Karen and I are here today talking about the winter landscape and all the beautiful plants that we have in wintertime. It seems a little bit of a contradiction that we're standing in front of this beautiful
summer scene.
Summer scene, exactly, with hydrangeas and crepe myrtle and everything in the peak of bloom in summer, and we're talking about winter. But I kind of want to start out with this because I want to emphasize a lot of these plants, all of these plants that we're talking about have interest all throughout the year.
Oh yeah, exactly. Some of them have fall color, some have summer color. So to add winter color is just that third bonus.
Right, and we're going to start out talking a little bit about crepe myrtle, and I think sometimes this is what we think about, but it overwhelms and obscures some of the other beauty that doesn't reveal itself till wintertime.
Exactly, like the exfoliating bark. So crepe myrtle, that's what it looks like in the winter. And there are different shades of grays and browns and layers, and it's a remarkable tree then too.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, there's all these different colors out there and different varieties,
Yes.
sort of have different qualities that's in there. I know when I was selecting crepe myrtle for my backyard, I actually went through and reviewed the bark color. That was one of the determining factors
Part
in
of your
selecting
homework.
which one I was going to plant.
Right.
So everybody I know, when they're looking at crepe myrtles, they're talking about, oh, what's the flower color? And yes, that's
Exactly.
significant.
Right.
But you know, it's the structure, the flower color, and then I also went through and cross-referenced to make sure we had the exfoliating, peeling bark on there as well.
Yes.
So,
Yes. Wonderful.
Again, like I said, in the wintertime, we're getting this very close-up, detailed look at there, but the structure of the plant's beautiful, bark's beautiful. So that's why I say crepe myrtle is such a wonderful landscape plant.
Right, and another one that people don't realize is Akusa. We buy Akusas for those flowers, but the bark in the winter is lovely. In fact, the older they get, the better they get.
And Karen, I get people coming into the plant clinic all the time with this because they'll start finding bark sloughing off and peeling, falling down the ground. They come in there asking me what's wrong with their tree. But just as you said, I'm always telling them, well, hey, as it matures, as it gets older, this becomes more and more pronounced. But again, that's a wonderful quality of that plant.
Yep.
So it's Akusa dogwood.
Paperbark, we mentioned it before. It has unbelievable fall color for one. Great little tree, but look at that in the winter. I mean, it's amazing. It's the shades of brown of which we are going to talk about. This one shows you many, many lustrous reddish brown layers, and it's just a fabulous little tree.
Exactly.
Slow growing, but just gets better and better and better. It's wonderful.
Yeah, I do. I love this tree. It's one that I keep sort of waiting for my Akusa dogwood slowly dying, and I'm thinking this might be
There'll
going
be
in its place or something.
yes.
But Game Ray, I happened to be out the outlet mall in Leesburg, and I was so thrilled and impressed to find they had used this Paperbark Maple as their primary planting along there, because you don't see people using it very often. And it
Because
was
they're
such
more
a-
expensive, they're slow growing, so people are reluctant to maybe pay the price, but it's worth it.
Exactly, and you think about out there at the shopping mall, over time, the maintenance costs by having the right tree in the right place. I
Yes.
thought, hey, that's...
Good choice.
I don't see people in commercial landscapes looking forward that much very often.
Yeah, excellent choice.
Yeah, but that's Paperbark Maple,
And it's Japanese Stewardia, the pseudocamellia, it's a Stewardia pseudocamellia. Lovely, lovely. And the shades of browns and grays in that are really, and another slow grower, very, very slow growing tree.
And again, this plant, you know, gets beautiful blossoms on.
Yes.
It looks just like a camellia. That's where its name comes from when it's in flower, usually around May time period, nice fall color. I found these can be a little temperamental though.
Well, and I agree, but when they work, when they're really growing, when they're happy, they're just one of the best trees that you can have in your landscape.
Yeah, because I tried this in my front yard a couple times. Wasn't working for me, and so now there's a hemamelis sitting in its place.
Okay, well, that's a good choice too for
Exactly.
winter.
Yeah, exactly. But again, it's so nice that this time of year we get to actually see these other qualities.
Right, yeah.
And let's see what else you selected.
Perodia.
Ah, Perodia.
Wonderful tree. Wonderful, wonderful. I have a friend that grew this tree, and I remember the first time that it exfoliated, she was so happy that she went and she harvested, you know, the exfoliating bark. She was just so tickled that it had finally grown to the age that it was doing this.
And then what did she do with the bark she harvested?
She just showed it off to people.
Oh, okay. I was going to say,
little, look what I have.
you had me engaged. She was like,
No,
okay,
no.
what do you do with bark peelings?
Oh, no, you just, yes. I mean, wow, it's winter time, and this is what we get to appreciate, is that bark on a tree, you know, and that's another nice one for many seasons.
It is. So again, it's great fall color. It's in there. But I toss this slide in because as we're talking about bark and the beauty of bark that's in there,
Yes.
and it is irresistible. This is a beech tree, one of our native trees that has that very smooth, silvery bark in there.
Yes.
And if you go for a walk through the woods around here in the wintertime, they add such beauty to the landscape. There seems to be this irresistible urge to go etch and carve your name and graffiti into the trees. So I'm really just put this out to say, please don't. Please restrain yourself. And it's not just a matter of the cosmetics and aesthetics of marring the beauty of the tree, but this injures it. The bark is on there as a protective layer for the tree. I think of that as that outer coating, and whenever you injure the bark, anything that disrupts the integrity of the bark allows pathogens, rot, decay, insects to gain entry into the tree. So it really is damaging to their health. And Karen and I were speculating a little bit about why trees even have this exfoliating bark.
Right. Now, I only learned this from the last lecture that I gave on the topic at the Gallows store. It was mentioned to me that they exfoliate because that's their way of not letting vines grow up them, that the vine, as it tries to attach, will actually fall off because it falls off with the bark. You are a little skeptical about that, but
yeah.
I think that makes sense to me. I like that, that it gives me an answer to why they even do that. And then this is Harry Lauder's walking stick, which is a remarkable small tree, large shrub for winter. But what very few people know is it actually has this very, very small flower. And this is a sterile cultivar that was discovered in England, and it was named after Harry Lauder, who was a comedian, which is no surprise because who wants a walking stick that's so bent and wobbly? But the flower is what very few people even notice, which is very fleeting, and it's only there for a little bit, and that's the female part of the flower, and then this is the catkins, or the male, and the pollination is by wind, where you see all that yellow pollen in the air on a early spring day, which can be late February for these.
Yeah, and I think our next picture actually shows that as the pollen's starting to be released.
Yeah, and you'll just see every bit of wind that comes through will just lift the pollen up into the air.
Yeah, and obviously I've seen that, but I've never, in all these years, I've never observed the flower. But that's what you gotta love about gardening. I mean, every day, I mean, we've been doing this forever, but we still learn stuff every day.
Learn something new.
Good. Well, we're going to take a little break. When we come back, we've got more exciting adventures out in the winter garden. Thank you for joining us today on Merrifield's Gardening Advisor. We've got a lovely weekend coming up here, even looking at 50 degrees and stuff.
It's warming up. Yeah. It's a good thing.
So I know I've already seen a little bit of that spring fever, people coming into the store kind of itching for a little bit of color and stuff.
It's been dreary and cold and long.
It has, because you think back to Thanksgiving. I mean, it was snowing on Thanksgiving morning, so winter kind of came in early, and it's been sticking around.
Yeah.
But we're talking about the beauty, the joy. We're trying to put a little bit of a positive spin on all this.
Yes.
And gardens can be beautiful in the wintertime, and I'll just let everybody get a good look at this.
You can plan for it. So this was a photograph that I took at Longwood Gardens, and it's boxwoods that you see as the real structure, and then what you see in the middle is the seed heads of a stilby, which is a perennial, and they left the seed heads, they left the old flowers, there, in order to be able to have this scene for winter interest, which I thought was really interesting because you don't usually think of leaving a stilby for its seed heads. You think of a lot of other things, but not a stilby. So I was really impressed with this whole scene when I came upon it, and I was really, glad to be able to get a photograph of it as well, because this is very nice.
Yeah, and Karen, to me, this makes a good argument for this question always comes up of, people want to cut things down in the fall of the year, or do you leave them in place? I am such a believer in just leaving it in place this time of year, because it does add so much value to the landscape.
Right, and it's such a nice juxtaposition, that fine, detail with that heavy, massive sort of mass weight at the bottom, that I just loved what they did. Longwood Gardens always does everything so well.
It does. So you can imagine if somebody gone ahead and deadheaded these plants or cut them down, or the grasses. I mean, there'd be nothing.
It would be a lot different. And then this is a miscanthus that I recommend, and I don't generally recommend miscanthus because they can be quite invasive. They've become more and more of a problem. But this is Morning Light, and this is the one I recommend because it's sterile, and because it's also very upright, and for us in our climate, it's one of the only varieties that can stand up to snow weight, as in it stays upright. It's 5 feet tall, and it's just a beautiful brown in the winter, and you don't have to worry about the seed pods spreading and volunteering and getting away from you. So Morning Light as a miscanthus is the best one in my mind, and it has a very fine blade, with just a bit of variegation, a stripe down it, but it's very soft in the summer, beautiful in the fall, and great in the winter.
Yeah, and I was just sharing with Karen, and I previous home I partnered this up with sedum, and they both take on this sort of nice russet color towards late summer. So
Right,
they were very complementary.
You have to appreciate the browns in the winter, and there's so many, you know, reds and tans, and you know, you can put an entire garden together just for the browns for the winter.
Yeah. Absolutely, so there's good testimony of what it can do for you. And speaking of browns, this beautiful composition.
This is Panicum Northwind, which is another one that stands up very well to snow weight and just to the winds and things of winter, and it's got gorgeous brown color. And this was taken at Green Spring Gardens on January 14th. I was there on a very, very cold day. I took a lot of the photographs that we see for the Winter Interest lecture that I gave, and I wanted to show things, you know, as they were in the gardens this winter with the cold that we've had and the just seeming long, dreary days. So this one was really outstanding. Upright, beautiful, 4 to 5 feet tall, and lovely, lovely shade of brown. So very nice. And then we love, you know, the seed pods and things when they get the snow on them. And I've always sort of wondered, and I don't know, David, how you feel about that, but if the seed heads are flat like that and they get the snow on them, if that isn't functioning somehow like to chill them more. I always wondered about that. I mean, it's just, I do that all the time. I want answers for, I want logical
you do that
answers.
Whether it's exfoliating bark or flat seed heads. Why?
I want to know why.
Yeah,
but it's beautiful.
Minds want to know.
Yes, exactly. Because some of the seed pods on perennials, you know, sit up like this and the seeds are inside, and so it's almost like it's designed to hold the snow. So I wonder.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just wondering if it would have something to do with the accessibility of wildlife, because again, this is something we didn't really talk about. But this also provides such a valuable food source to wildlife through the winter time. So we're talking about from the beauty perspective and everything, but yeah, you guys say, what is the function of all this?
Function, exactly. Exactly.
Okay, well, let's see what's next.
The browns. Sedum, this is Sedum spectabilis, and it could be autumn joy or autumn fire, I'm not sure, but that nice, again, that flat umbelliferous head and that beautiful brown, which, as you said, you had it with Miscanthus Morning Light. I mean, you could take any of these browns and put them together, and you're going to show us some evergreens that have gorgeous browns for winter, which would not have that color in summer, but they can be paired up as well, just for you to have this entire, you know, layout with just all of the browns.
Yeah, I like so much what you're talking about in the beginning of the show about documenting all this with photographs. Because I know I've been able to get out whether it's just a light frost on some of these seed heads, and they stand out so beautifully. Yeah,
and you're not going to remember all those shades of brown.
Yeah.
If you're not really taking notes or being observant, then you won't realize that, you know, you've got a red brown and a tan brown and a blondish brown and all these wonderful shades that, you know, to get that, to get them together and to work well with each other, I mean, you can do so much. So.
Absolutely. So everybody comes and tells me it looks dead. No, it doesn't look dead. It's brown.
Dead.
It's beautiful.
It's beautiful.
Exactly. But there are other colors out there that work with.
And this is Miscanthus Morning Light again with Sparkleberry, one of the Ilex verticillatas, the deciduous hollies. And I just love the red against the brown. I mean, how can you not love that? This is one of my favorite photographs I ever took. I just love it. It was at Green Spring Gardens.
Yeah, and obviously the Winterberry hollies are so popular. There's many varieties, all different heights and sizes that are out there.
With different colored berries, which we're going to show you Winter Gold, which is more of an orange berry, and this is just before the leaves fall. So the interest for these, they're not much in the way of fall color, but you know, you've got them, the berries themselves are generally not eaten by birds until later on. So you do get to enjoy them for quite some time. And then we have this orangish berry, which they actually change quite a bit. This color changes quite a bit as we go through winter. But this is just before it loses its leaves, and then it loses its leaves, and you just have these bare stems with these orange berries or red berries, and there's dwarf varieties. Red Sprite is a lovely little red berried dwarf variety. So they're just great for us. I mean, I see more and more of them in the landscape, and I'm happy to see that.
Yeah.
They are just really for winter, but they really do it right. do it well.
They sure do. So that's spectacular. Now we've looked at bark, we've looked at seed heads, we've looked at berries.
Yeah.
We're going to take a commercial break and see what we can have next.
All right.
We're going to get right back to seeing what's going on in the winter garden. As I said, we did a pretty good look at some of the interesting bark that's on trees. We looked a little bit at seed heads, and you talked a lot about how brown can really add a lot of interest.
Right.
But there are other colors we can get in the winter landscape.
Right, and we call them evergreens, but some are ever gray, ever blue, ever yellow. You know, I always laugh when I say that when I'm describing plants to people, because evergreen is very often a misnomer. But we do have lovely, lovely choices for our garden, and blues and yellows are a part of it. But there's also that change. There's a lot of them that are what we call evergreen, but in the winter they'll turn, you know, again, we talk about browns, but they get heavier actually in their color, and they change a lot, and they're part of what we can use when we, you know, apply all these other plants we've been showing you with browns. And one of them is the gold mop Chamaecyparis with its yellow, which I think is one of the very, very, very best plants we can plant as far as winter interest goes. I love the brightness of it, and you put this with something like the red berries we talked about, or even like the redness of a dwarf shrubby Nandina, and you have something remarkable for winter. So I'm a big fan of Chamaecyparis gold mop.
Yeah, and I love that cascading, fine textured leaf on there as well.
Yeah, and you can control the height with them. I see them large, but I've also seen them, you know, where they've been pruned and kept lower. So it's a nice plant that you can put in many places in your garden or your yard. And the yellow twig dogwood, which is only one, there's the red twig, there's the midwinter fire, there's a few even newer than that. The thing to remember is to cut them back, because that color on the branch is the strongest on the new growth. But this is how they look in the winter once they've been cut back in spring, so that all that new growth comes up, and then once they lose their leaves, you get this lovely stem. And you can cut those, you want to cut those in early April or March of this, you know, this coming up March or April, so that they produce all this lovely new growth, which will be the color you'll get next winter.
And what's the ground cover under there?
This was at Longwood Gardens, and they used roping to put under there, and pine needles, just to set off the yellowness of this yellow twig dogwood.
I just thought, I don't know, that's what really captured my imagination on that picture. I thought, what a great thing to do with holiday greens
Exactly.
that might be left over.
Right, yeah. No, it was beautiful. And yellows, you know, we've been talking about the yellows, just yucca goldsport. This was another one that I took while I was preparing for the winter lecture, and this was taken on January the 14th. It was 23 degrees. It was super cold, and look how bright that is, how cheerful that is. What a great plant. So, you know, another bright yellow for us in our climate for winter and summer and spring and fall.
Yeah, I'd like to use yellows as one of the primary colors in my garden, because I'm a little bit of a dark, shady environment, and I use a lot of yellows where I can to really pop it out and get some color going.
Contrast, you know, something that's not just green. And this little creeping euphorbia, the euphorbias are there's a lot of varieties, but this is one that flowers very, very early. The seed pods that it produces, and these are the flowers that are in March, low growing, ground cover, almost like a rock garden plant. The seed pods that it produces are like little green marbles, and it's the ants that go after the eliosomes that are inside the seed and carry the seeds around. So I remember when I had my nursery and we sold this plant, I never planted it anywhere in the nursery, but it was growing everywhere in the nursery because the ants had done that for me, and it was in the paths, it was in the rock garden, and it's ever gray, you know, ever blue. So it's a little different than some of the deciduous euphorbias, in that you get great, not only great winter color, but you get the flowers that come on it so early. So I really like this plant. It wants sun and dry. And then this is at Meadowlark Gardens, the conifer collection that they have there. And you can see what we've been talking about as far as all of those different shades of blues and yellows, and then the things, the colors change for winter. So David's going to show you a few that have done just that are more in the brown shades that we've been talking about.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting as we're talking about the winter landscape, as Karen said several times, a lot of our evergreens actually have a winter color. It goes on. So I just selected 3 out of our nursery beds, and one started a little bit with Cryptomeria. Now, Cryptomeria is typically a big, 40-foot, 50-foot tall tree, but there's a lot of different varieties. I just brought the little dwarf one in here called Tansu today, and you can see it gets that deep russet color in there, very dark brown that's there. I get, again, people saying, oh, it looks dead, or it's dying, or something's wrong. No, all Cryptomeria will discolor or go to a little bit of a brown to some extent, and that will vary a little bit the varieties. This is somewhat extreme. And again, this is a variety that stays very small that you would use in rock gardens. Right next to it, and providing a beautiful backdrop right here, is this arborvitae. This is a variety that's called Goldie, and it was selected specifically for the coloration that goes in there. It will go sort of a bright yellow when the new growth emerges in spring, but takes on this spectacular, almost orange coloration as the cold temperatures go in there through winter. So again, it's definitely an evergreen, but you'll see those colors change, and this eventually grows to about 10, 12, 14 feet tall, so it's a nice specimen evergreen that's in there. I will also say, if you want to get this plant, this is the only one we have. This time of year we do carry trees and shrubs throughout the year, but sometimes the selection is a little bit limited. But we'll be getting more of these in this spring, and you can always come by the garden center to see it for yourself. And next to it is a fairly recent recent introduction. This is another arborvitae down here that's called Fire Chief. You may know there's a arborvitae, it's called Rheingold, which has a little bit more of a yellowish tinge to it. This is a variation on there which takes on close to a red color during the winter time. It's a compact one that's going to mature at about 4 feet tall, 4 feet wide. So these are all needled evergreens that will add that splash of color to the winter landscape. And again, we have to take a commercial break, but stick with us. We've got more exciting plants for you when we come back. Thank you for joining us today on Merrifield's Gardening Advisor, and Karen Rexroad's with me here today, and she works with us out at our Fair Oaks store. So, and plus do a lot of the lectures and classes.
Right.
So you've got several more in our seminar series
I do,
still
yes.
ahead.
One of them is bulbs, tubers, and corms, which I'm looking forward to. That's going to be a good one. And then the other one is annuals, which I'm a perennial person, but I can't wait to do the annual one because I have lots and lots and lots of stuff to show you.
Yeah. So. Well, that's no coincidence why I plugged your name into those topics, right?
Yeah, thank you.
It's going to be fantastic.
Thank you.
So, as always, watch our seminars, watch our show. We're always trying to reach out and educate everybody. Figure the more that you know about gardening, the more you're interested.
The more successful you'll be.
And the more interested you'll be in coming to the garden center.
Yeah.
Great. So, we're talking about the winter landscape today. We've been covering lots of ground, but what's next?
So now we're going to look at some of the very early flowering trees. Some and a few perennials. The magnolias with their buds that have that furry bud that are remarkable. This is a star magnolia, backlit, lovely photograph, but they are very active very early in the year. This is not quite yet, but very soon, where you'll see this bud swell and the flowers open, and they've done a lot of hybridization with these, so that, because we find with the star magnolias, they tend to quite often get frozen because they flower so early. So they've hybridized them to flower a little bit later, which works a little better for our climate, I find.
It is, and it's so strange. I remember it was, I want to say maybe 3 years ago, we had in March 90-degree weather. There was one day in March or something, and then all these things start to pop open, and then they get frozen.
Right.
So each year is different, but But really, that does show how the buds can add so much interest.
Oh,
in
right.
the
No, that's one of the best for just the buds. Although Edgeworthia is not bad. I love the little buds, and then the fragrance of the flowers is remarkable.
Right, and the buds are what really adds the winter interest in there. Those buds that you'll see, well, it's on my right-hand side of the screen there, those fat white buds, they persist all through the winter time, and they're really just that attractive. They're almost the size of a ping pong ball, so it's noticeable. And then just at the very end of winter, right before spring comes, they pop into those blooms, and like I said, wonderful fragrance.
And this is a plant that I know I first found probably 20 years ago, and nobody considered it hardy then. But now we plant it out in the landscape, and it's done well for the last, you know, really cold few winters.
Yeah, that's always a little skeptical of it myself, but like I said, I've seen it in established landscapes long enough to feel like, hey, they made it through last winter,
right,
so
exactly.
I think we're in pretty good shape with this one.
And even in places that were like in the parking lot of the Gainesville store, they have it planted all around, and I kept going over there and saying, how are you guys doing? And they were fine.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
and that's closely related
plant.
to Daphne. A lot of you know Daphne. So
they're the fragrance.
you can see similarities.
Yeah.
So buds and flowers.
Yeah, the witch hazels, they're fabulous. And I wanted to say a little bit something about their leaf drop or lack of, because this year seems to be worse than usual. And you say, David, that it's because of the way winter came in, that it was cold early fast?
Well, that's what I think. I'm pretty confident on that. A lot of people, even with maple trees, you know, red maples, our native tree, as well as Japanese maples, and particular, you know, the leaves persisted. But again, if you think back last year in November, we went to really cold temperatures, even in that second week in November. And I'm pretty sure a lot of trees, they just didn't get to complete their whole dormancy process. You know, didn't form those abscission zones, the leaves didn't shed off, and then whammo, they got hit with freezing temperatures, and they were just left dangling on. The big thing is, what do you do about it? For the most part, I'm saying leave it alone.
Right.
But on some of these witch hazel, because you don't want the leaves persisting in to the blooming time, because then it detracts. You know, I could see being crazy enough to go out with some scissors and sort of even go in there and surgically remove them just to pretty it up.
Yeah, and it's unusual to have them be so persistent with the leaves. They generally, that picture was not taken this winter. It was taken, you know, I don't know how many winters ago, but, you know, in a good year, they lose their leaves, so you do see just those flowers like you just saw. And that's Jelena, and the next one is Luna with the yellow flowers, which is so bright and cheerful. And these are winter flowering. Different, you know, different varieties go a little later, some are a little earlier, but they definitely do it in the February frame of year, and some of them are very fragrant, and they also have good fall color.
Yeah, again, that's what I always say. You know, people have heard me say it over and over. I'm in a little townhouse garden, and each square foot is so valuable. I only put things in that have year-round interest. It's got to be something that gives me beauty throughout the year. So that's why the witch hazel's a specimen plant in my garden. Right. Because it does have the seasonal year-round interest.
And there's even variety that blooms, the two varieties that bloom in November, December, which I have in my garden, and very fragrant, and I love them. So these are more your spring or your literally your February and March flowering varieties. And then in the perennials, or even a lot of times the ericas and the heaths and the heathers are put into the shrub category, but they've been flowering since January. And I'm talking full bloom. And this was taken this year. And this is a photograph from the middle of January, and there it is in full bloom, and just as hardy as can be, and tough, and, you know, no problems with the cold at all.
Yeah, and that's definitely been sort of one of my goals. I want to be able to walk through my little garden, and any month out of the year, something will be there to grab your eye. So that's fantastic if you can have blooms in the winter.
Yeah. And then the next is Sarcocoa, which I recommend to people all the time for their landscape because it's solidly evergreen. It has February flowers that are white and hidden beneath the foliage, but what you notice, you don't really see the flowers. What you notice is the fragrance, and the fragrance will, on a warm day in February, you just can't deny it. I mean, it's just so powerful, and it will lure you into the garden, and you'll just stand there wondering, what on earth is this fragrance coming from? And the Sarcococa is a low evergreen ground covering plant, and that fragrance, and not only do you grow it for the fact that it's evergreen in our climate, and it's a great ground cover, but for the fragrant flowers that come at a time of year when you really, really don't expect them.
And the deer don't bother.
And the deer, right, which is another good thing, right. Everybody always wants to know what the deer don't like. So that's one. And then we have rhodea. And rhodea is an interesting plant in that it's in the same family as lily of the valley. And it's evergreen. And this is, again, taken in the middle of this photograph in the middle of January. It's very, very slow growing. It produces these berries that are there in the winter. You can grow it from the seed, but it's extremely slow. It does spread, but again, it does it slowly. It becomes a ground cover, and it's solidly evergreen, and that really is the primary reason that you're going to grow it, is because it's evergreen. The berries are, a little secondary, perk, but it's that evergreen foliage that you grow it for.
Okay, we're going to have to take a little break right now, but again, it's only going to be a couple minutes, and then we're going to be right back with more beautiful flowers for the winter landscape. Talking
exactly
for winter interest right
so
there.
So you see how contorted it is. It's a contorted filbert, and so you understand that Harry Lauder was a comedian, because he wants a walking stick that's that contorted.
Now I do.
Oh.
Yeah, when I need one.
I read he was a comedian, but he also collected walking sticks.
Huh.
So apparently that was why the person that discovered it named it after him.
Yeah, it's fun to learn the history of all these plants. Well, we're talking about flowers, Karen, so let's get right back to it.
Sure. Winter aconite is one that we saw a photograph of before, and we're going to look at it again. And it's a tuber, so it's a little bulb, yellow flowering, and you buy them in the fall, like you do a lot of your bulbs. And it's small. I mean, it's literally just inches off the ground. But a friend discovered this area that was not far from my home, where there was literally like an acre or more of it growing wild, where it had, I guess it had seeded. So it's just this tiny little thing flat on the ground. It's about to bloom in the garden. It literally has yellow color on it already, and the buds are showing, and they're above ground. By the 15th of February, pretty much it's almost guaranteed every year that it's in full bloom, and by March 1st it's finished. So it's very fleeting. It apparently doesn't mind the cold at all, and it's a lovely, bright, little cheerful thing to have blooming, at this time of year, because gosh, imagine, we had, what did you say the other night? You said, well, you had 11 degrees?
Yes.
11 degrees, and this plant is out there and it wants to bloom. To me, that's crazy.
And I've got one customer I know that's been coming in every single year for I don't know how many years, and he buys a handful of these bulbs.
Right.
I'd love to see what that looks like over the years,
right.
how that's developed.
And I find when you buy the bulbs, they're kind of dry, so I like to soak them overnight before I plant them. And I also like to collect the seeds and deposit them on like south sides of rocks and places where they bloom as early as possible. Because it's nice to think when you go out that spring is coming, because you see the little winter aconites about to bloom.
And another bulb?
Lovely snowdrops. Oh my gosh, how can you not love the snowdrops? I have lots of varieties, and they, they're called snowdrops because of the time that they bloom, and snow doesn't seem to hamper them one little bit. And it's another bulb. It's a true bulb in this case, and if you want to really learn the differences, then go to my lecture in March where I'll be talking about that. And I think that's March 14th, I'm not positive, but snowdrops are coming up, and the buds are showing, and they're going to be blooming here very, very shortly. And you can get all different varieties of snowdrops. Again, they're very small, low to the ground, not much more than ever 6 inches tall, but a nice little complement to winter aconites. Quite often they'll bloom together. So again, this is just another lovely bulb you buy in the fall and plant it, and it can be sun or shade. And Helleborus foetidus. So the Helleborus are very popular because they tend to bloom in the winter, And this is foetidus, which is the stinking Helleborus is the common name, and this is out at the Upperville Church in Upperville, Virginia, where it's growing. And this is the one variety I find can grow in sun or shade. It actually doesn't mind growing in full sun, but those green, what look to be like flowers, are very, very persistent, and it's actually sepals that will stay for literally for months and months and months. And the foliage itself, that really dark green, very divided leaf, is very evergreen, and so it's a great plant. It's another variety of Helleborus. And why, you know, you kind of wonder to yourself, why do plants bloom at such a seemingly bad time as far as survival, and why would they even bother to do that? But you'll see in our next slide that the honeybees, the honeybees will fly at 55 degrees, and we're going to have days like that tomorrow, and close to that today. So, you know, for that plant, it's sort of a guaranteed pollination, because there's not a lot going on out there. So this is part of their survival strategy, is that, you know, they're flowering when very little else is, and the honeybees will find them, and it's pretty much guaranteed that they will get pollinated. And then one of the things that I really like to do to perennials, especially to primroses in my garden, I find that they try to be evergreen, and their foliage gets really damaged by the fluctuations in temperature and you know, the freezing and the thawing. So I will take a leftover Christmas tree, or even cut branches from some of my evergreens in my garden, and lay them over those plants in fall, and weight it down, which you need to do, otherwise it'll just blow away, with a couple of bricks. And once you do that, and you can keep checking it through February, once you look in there, you'll find that, you know, they look remarkable. It's a great thing to do.
Super quick, I want to put this last picture up to let you know spring is on the way. If we can put that last picture up.
This is taken March 31st, so.
Okay, we'll see you next.